Welcome to the Concert Queen Connect. So excited for our guest this week. He is probably someone that is one of the most famous people in my eyes because we would not have shows, we would not have concerts, we would not have festivals without this person. So it's probably a good thing if you haven't heard of him, because if you have, then that means that something happened. Something went wrong. Please welcome Drew Dunavan. Welcome.
Hey.
Co-founder of The Word Company.
Yeah. Howdy, y'all.
So tell people exactly what The Word Company does and kind of a little history about you guys.
Yeah. So we are a AV company. We provide
AV stands for the people out there.
Audio, video. And but we also provide lighting and staging and trussing, and we typically provide all the muscle and crew support for concerts, corporate events, private events, galas, all that kind of stuff.
So without you, I mean, that's what I'm saying, y'all. So like all the artists, all the people you see that are on stage, they would not look and sound as good if it weren't for you.
I tell you what, yeah. I mean, you know, that's what we do. It's a mutual beneficial ecosystem. Without the artists, you know, we wouldn't be there, and without us, they wouldn't be able to put their stuff out there.
Yeah. So how does one get into AV? So just from like the start, was it something you were always interested in? Was shows, or were you in something completely different industry and then kind of pivoted towards this? Like, how did you get into all of this?
So I sort of stumbled into it. I was playing music, so I started on the musician side, and this was when I was going to UT, and it was my sophomore year at UT, and I took a class taught by Clifford Antone before.
Clifford Antone.
The Clifford Antone.
Wow, that's really cool.
He taught a class called The History of Blues, and it was the best. It was actually like the only class I attended that year. I didn't last long in college.
You do remember that one class? I just took one.
I had 5 classes I was supposed to go to, but that one I went to every week, and it was the history of blues. And so, you know, all he did was pretty much just talk about his club and his passion for blues. And it was amazing. He had like all these home videos, you know, with Muddy Waters back in the day and the early days of Stevie Ray Vaughan. And so when I was in that class, it just struck me. I was like, this is what I want to do. I didn't know what it was that he did, but I knew music one way or another was, you know, what I wanted to do. And so I was playing music at the time, not really in a band, but just playing music. And, I knew I was going to be, you know, not attending college after that year. And so I started calling around a bunch of recording studios in town. Cool. And just cold calling them and saying, hey, you know.
How old were you when you were doing this?
I was 18 or 19?
18, 19? Wow. So you had the hustle from the start.
You know, kind of knew that, you know, I didn't know how, but knew I wanted to get in there. Mm-hmm. And so I started calling around all the studios, you know, I'll sweep, I'll mop. I didn't know anything about recording. And, you know, they're all like, nah, you know, we don't need anything like that. But the one studio that did turned out to be Willie Nelson's studio.
Okay, so you got Clifford Antone, Willie Nelson. Okay, keep going. Let's
the stars sort of aligned.
Yeah, and the all-stars of Austin.
And I mean, and I didn't even know it was really Willie's studio. I was literally like, you know, I think I was on the internet back then. And so like, you know, I was just, you know, Googling in the early days, and it was Purnell Studio out in, you know, Spacewood/Spicewood, you know, where his studio is. And I called them, and the manager said, you know, yeah, actually, you know, why don't you come on out and I'll interview you, whatever. And I went out there, and we talked for like 2-3 hours, and he was like, okay, here are the keys. You know, you need to be here 4 days a week to make coffee. He's got like, Willie's studio has this incredible vault of reels and tapes of just everybody. And, you know, part of the reason why they brought me on is they had to start like cataloging it, organizing it. So I spent, the first 6 months there just in that vault, going through all these artists and cataloging and everything.
God, that was your job.
And that was my job. And it was pretty cool. And
yeah. Well, what were some of the things? Sorry to. It's just that's such a fascinating thing to be like. Just to recap that, you're in a vault with all of Willie Nelson's. Like, are these kind of like never before seen recordings and things that he'd done, or were these things that were like his concerts and?
It was a lot. A lot of it was like the recordings that never made it out.
Wow.
And
That's
not
really
only Willie stuff, but also just tons of artists who would just come in and demo stuff. And so I spent a good amount of time kind of, in there. And then, I was showing up to work on time. So they moved me into the studio, where then I started kind of getting to, help prep before a session. So setting up mics and all that stuff. And in there is like Paul Wall came out one weekend and he did.
Paul Wall's a really famous Houston rapper, H-Town.
Yeah.
So with Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Just to clarify for the people that may not know who Paul Wall is. We're talking like the full grill, like jerseys, and you've got Willie Nelson, who is like hippie Willie Nelson. Amazing.
Now, Grant Willie wasn't in on that session, but he rented anybody could come through that studio, and so many different varieties of music were in there. And that was definitely an experience. That was like, a 5-day stretch, and I got to meet Dr. Lee, who's a great, hip hop producer. And he was the producer engineer during that session. And these people who you just kind of see as just epic and beyond reach were so down to earth, very welcoming and inviting and everything like that. But I remember Dr. Lee was like, I was kind of in the first couple of days of the session, I kept my distance, didn't want to, bug anything, but he kind of saw me. I'd like kind of poke my head in every now and again, see what's up. And so he invited me into the control booth and like let me hang out there for the rest of the sessions for the next 3-4 days. And
oh my goodness.
So that was really cool. So from there, I was working out there, and that was an internship, so I wasn't getting paid at all.
I don't even know where this conversation is going to go. If that's where we're starting, like you're setting the bar pretty high here, Drew, with where you were working for your internship. Okay,
that was definitely peaks. There's some valleys, but that was a peak, and so I was in there, and I did, I got to meet Willie. I got to meet his sister. His sister did sessions out there, Bobby, and she was awesome. And so while I was out there, Willie Nelson's road manager at the time, who passed away, a little while ago, his name was Pooty Locke. And he had a honky tonk just down the road from the studio called Pooty's Hilltop. And, that's where... just all the Texas country folks go. And there's some ragers out there. And one night their sound engineer wasn't able to make it. And I was at the studio and they were like, hey, can you go run sound? And I was like, yeah, sure. I've never run sound before.
Oh, really?
I'd
My goodness.
And that's kind of how I got into it.
Smile and nod. Yeah. I can do that.
And that's kind of how you have to break in, when you're new to it, you just kind of have to say yes and throw yourself in. And I had no idea what I was doing. And the first band that was out there that I had to mix for was the Band of Heathens. And they're like a freaking awesome band, like 5-part harmony, all this stuff. And so the opener, they had an opener come out, and I was so stressed. And I was, like kind of remembering, like the guy had told me, okay, do this, that, whatever. And I was trying to remember it all. And I got music, or I got, sound coming out of speakers. And I was like, okay, sweet, I'm good. And when the set is about done for the opener, Band of Heathen sound guy comes up to me and he was like, hey, just so you know, your mains are muted, and all that was just coming out of the monitors the whole time. And I was like, oh no.
So for people that aren't familiar with what that means, what is the mains and the monitors?
Right. So when you go to a show, you have your main PA, which is your speakers that are, facing the audience and like what the audience receives the sound from. And the monitors are for the musicians, and it shoots back at the musicians. So if you're just hearing the monitors, it's not going to sound good to the audience. But I feel really bad for the band because I was probably cranking those monitors really loud. It's like, it sounds good. You can hear it, And so the Band of Heathen sound guy, he was super cool. He realized real quick I had no clue what I was doing. And he was like, here, let me kind of show you a couple things. First, unmute the mains. So I did that. And he ended up running sound for that set. Thank God.
Okay. So I was like, had their show already like gone all the way through?
For the the openers, like I did sound for the openers.
Got it.
And
okay, so there wasn't the actual band.
It wasn't the Band of Heathens. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank God. And so, that sort of woke me up real quick. I was like, okay, I've got a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I kind of started just diving in, YouTube. I started just going out to Pootie's, just kind of, during the afternoons, playing around with the stuff. And then they invited me to keep coming back out and be like, the weekday engineer for just the weekday bands. And so I started doing that for a while. And then they brought me in on some like weekend shows, and which was like freaking awesome. I got to do sound for just some of those like Texas legends, Ray Wiley Hubbard, Pat Green, like bunch of those folks. And the funny thing is that I still was very green. I still was kind of winging it. And one night it was, I can't remember his name, but he was another old school Texas artist. And Pootie was there, the Willie's road manager. And I was just having a heck of a time running sound, like just not getting it. There's feedback, and I could feel it in my stomach, that ulcer was coming on. And Pootie brought me out after the show, and he was like, that was absolutely horrible. You're fired. You can't, it's nice knowing you kind of thing. And so that's when I hit a valley. But
yeah, you're saying this with a smile, but I'm sure like in that moment, that was probably heartbreaking for you because you become, you're doing all these extra things and you're trying so hard and that happened. So
I was a young, arrogant kid at the time. So it went one ear out the other kind of thing. I was like, okay, I'm fired. But I realized that that was definitely a sobering moment. I was like, okay, I really do want to do this. So I showed up the next day.
This is where the smile is coming from. Yeah. Okay, I get it now.
I showed up the next day.
He's got something. There's something to the story. Okay, showed up the next day.
And I just start like organizing the tech closet. I was like, I got to do something. So I start organizing the tech closet, and Pootie shows up. He always would, go there for a beer or burger or whatever in the afternoon. And he's like, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah, it is frowned upon to go to a place after you've been fired.
Yeah.
Typically. So yeah, that was kind of ballsy.
It was.
As a kid to do that. But yeah, amazing. So he's like, what are you doing here?
What are you doing here? And I told him, I was like, I'm going to learn. Like, I'm going to work here for free, and I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to work my way back. And he just kind of did his Pootie thing and laughed. Was like, okay, whatever, And I just kept showing up. And
sound like my ex-boyfriend. No, just kidding. No, just kidding. But anyway, no, keep going.
And so, eventually the sound engineer out there, who was hired out there, he was taking note of it, and I started shadowing him more and more. And I actually started showing that I knew what I was doing and how to do things. And so I probably did that for 2 or 3 months. And then Pootie was like, okay, we got a show. We need you. Can you come back? And I was like, yeah. So then I made my way back in, and then I ended up working there for another year, just straight up running sound. So that is how I got into the production world.
That's wild. You literally forced your way in. You stay there. You're like, I'm not leaving. And you dug your heels into the ground.
Pretty much, you kind of have to, I don't know, you have to hit those walls. And also, when you're in something, it's hard to recognize like where you are and the opportunity that you have. And I certainly didn't in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment when, I was fired, that really woke me up and like kind of, showed me that you have to, if you're going to pursue something, you have to actually like put effort into it. You can't continually wing it over time. You can wing it. There's a window of
mm-hmm.
winging, but then once you're out of that window, then you're just kind of amateur status, or you're lazy, or you're whatever. And so that was my moment. And I really began to figure out, production and sound. And that was the beginning for me to really dive into it. And so from that point, I was working out at Pootie's for, about 2 years in total. And
3 of those months unpaid.
3 of those months unpaid. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so I kind of, I was kind of getting in just kind of a plateau there, it was sort of the same thing. It was becoming very easy, and it was still fun, but it was a long drive out to Spicewood every day. And I was really kind of wanting to focus on music again and play music and kind of stay in Austin and not have to be, traveling that much at night and all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up, kind of leaving Pootie's, and that was like they had a great send off for me. It was like a really cool moment.
Like, is he really leaving, or is he just going to come back again tomorrow?
Right. And funny enough, I wasn't even working there when I was, it was before I was 21 when I was working there. And on my 21st birthday, I had to run sound for a show there. And, went up, I'd been drinking there, and I went up to go grab a drink at the bar, and I showed him my ID. They never ID me, and I showed him my ID, and the bartender was just like, this whole time, dude, I don't know,
That's
they're
great.
good now, they're good.
They're
but
great. That was back in the day. That's
yeah. That was, early 2000s.
But it's different when you're working there.
It is.
I don't know. It's all good.
But they treated me like family out there, and I learned a ton, and I was introduced to a ton of great people. And so, I just kind of took that effort and was actually decided I really wanted to pursue music because I was mixing it so much, and I was just getting really into music. And so I wanted to keep playing it. And so I formed a band, and we started playing around Austin a ton. And then
what was the name of this band?
We were called the Brimmers.
The Brimmers.
The Brimmers.
I like the way you said the Brimmers.
The Brimmers. We were electric blues boogie.
Okay.
We loved like Canned Heat and Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King, all those.
Amazing.
And so that was sort of our jam and what we were doing. And so we were on a good little rise. This was before White Horse and all that. And this is when Dennis, the owner of White Horse, was working at Hole in the Wall, and he had taken a liking to us, and he had kind of filled us in. He was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting my own place, and I would love for you guys to be the house band out there or play, a ton. And so we were super stoked. And, we knew it wasn't going to necessarily open tomorrow. This was like, this was probably a year or two before it even opened. But he kind of told us this idea and what he wanted to do. And so we were stoked, and we were moving in some positive directions. And we'd gone to New Orleans to play some shows. And on our way back from New Orleans, it was a 3-piece band. I was bass, we had a guitarist and drummer, and our drummer was from Beaumont. And so Beaumont, Texas. Mm-hmm. And he, when we were driving back from New Orleans, he split off with a friend and wanted to go back to Beaumont to hang with his family, and then come drive back to Austin, a couple days later. And when he was driving back from Beaumont to Austin, he ended up getting arrested for possession of marijuana.
Oh, no.
And And his livelihood was music. You know, that was it. He didn't have a job in Austin.
That hurts.
And it was definitely, and it was in, was it Williamson County, or it was in some county where it's like, it is not a good place to get arrested for that. And so when he got arrested, that sort of kind of put a stop to the band, because we had just developed so much as a band and we didn't want to find a new drummer and all this stuff. And so this was probably 2009 when we were at this point, and that happened. And so that was a big bummer. And so we kind of, the guitarist and I were living together at the time in a house. And at that house, we had a little 400 square foot back house that our landlord was using as her art studio. And, you know, when the band kind of, you know, took a break or whatever, I started getting back into sound again. And so I was going to Rock and Roll Rentals a bunch and renting equipment. Mm-hmm. And so that's actually where I met my business partner. He was my friend too, but Ollie, Rams and Ollie, we met through Rock and Roll Rentals. Mm-hmm. And him and I started getting along really well, because I would just like go to him, tell him what I'm trying to do for a show and what gear I need and all this stuff. And so we kind of developed a good friendship through that. And right around that same time, I had another friend who was going to TCU for School of Music, and the TCU School of Music was redoing their whole recording studio. And so they had gotten rid of their Studio Master consoles, this like old school console. Its claim to fame is like Phil Collins used the Studio Master console. And so he showed up at our house one day. He was like, "Hey, the studio just, gave this to me. Do you guys want it?" And we were like, "All right." And so we took the console, we took it apart, cleaned it all out, turned it on, and it worked. And pretty much when that worked, I went to my friend Ali and I was like, "Hey, do you want to start a recording studio?"
Oh my goodness.
And that's how Word started. And Word was, at that time, we were called Word Recording Enterprises.
Okay. So where does the term Word, like WERD, where does that come from?
So Word is Drew backwards.
The mystery is solved.
The mystery is solved.
Okay. Word is Drew backwards. Got it.
Yeah. And it's taken friends and family years to catch that.
Really?
Oh yeah. and like when it clicks, they're like, "Oh," they have the aha moment.
Yeah.
So that's how Word started. We started out as a recording studio, and our landlord was super cool. She let us rent out the back house. She moved out. She let us rent it out. The studio was, it was a little room it was like 2 rooms separated by a little like doorway. And in our DIY manner, our neighbor across the street was redoing all their floors, and they'd like just ripped out all their floors. And so we took all their floors and like put it in the studio. A friend had redone one of their houses, and they had these like sliding barn doors. And we took that and like installed a barn door and like started just doing all this stuff. So the studio was great. That's when we started in 2010. So that was the birth of Word.
So you had all this, it just sounds like tenacity, just to kind of do it yourself, kind of take charge, figure it out if you didn't know how to do it. So then you went into the recording studio. So then how has that progressed into what you're doing now?
So in the recording studio, we'd always been very kind of multifunctional with all of our approach, so we were recording bands, but we were also filming them, and we were doing interviews.
You're doing all of this.
Just doing all of this, just kind of capturing as much as we could. Like, how could we be different than the other studios? And so that was really kind of our approach to everything. And so a lot of these bands, and at the time when we started Word in 2010, I was still a barista at Cafe Medici, and Ollie was still at Rock and Roll Rentals. And so we were, Ollie was, getting a lot of inquiries for live sound because he was at Rock and Roll Rentals. And a lot of our bands were, they'd record and say, "Hey, we're doing a show. Can you guys run sound for the show?" And that's how we began making the transition into live production. Mm-hmm. And from there, it just kind of kept steamrolling, and we started getting a lot more work in the live realm. And then we also kind of started realizing, the recording was sort of a thing of passion because we had our day jobs. So we kind of were like, okay, it's really hard to generate revenue with recording, especially when we're working with friends and we want to, be conscious of all of that. And in the live world, we were, able to kind of set a rate, get paid for that rate. And that kind of really kind of pushed us in that area to go live. So then in 2012, we formed our official LLC. We quit our day jobs, and that's when Word began.
Oh my goodness. So you have Word, and then you're doing, like you said, you're starting to do more of the live. So what were you doing? And I guess that's probably something that people don't necessarily know is like what goes on all behind the scenes, because people just show up, the concert experience, they walk in and they just see not like someone presses play, but they just see the artist, they see the performance, and then they leave. So how much prep is going into each of these shows? Like you said, if you're getting hired and they're like, hey, Drew, we want you to come and, like you're saying, run sound or run, like, what does that whole process kind of look like? Are you coming in like at the very end of it, or like you said, last minute, or is it something like the artist requests you? Like, just how do you get inserted into that equation?
Right. It's, now where we are now, it's a lot more thought out process.
Okay.
The projects we work on now can range from a year planning to 6 months. It really depends. And where we find ourselves really helping our clients out is, on the production side, it's, what the audience doesn't know is like, yeah, you think it's sound or lighting, but there's a lot of other third-party vendors that are around. There's backline, there's staging.
Yeah, can you explain props. Like what those, like, so backline is what?
So backline is all the instruments, amplifiers, drums, all those things. Traditionally on events, a lot of that stuff gets supplied so that the band doesn't have to bring their own gear, because you have a lot of bands on a bill. So you have to have really quick changeovers to stay on time. And so there's a lot of third-party vendors that are involved with the show, beyond just production. And so it takes a lot of coordination between all parties to make it all go smooth. And so that's where we've really, focused our efforts over the years, as being that production manager as well as that production house, to help coordinate with the client, to, help all those third parties know when they're supposed to be, where they're supposed to be, what the scope is, expectations, all those things. So there's a lot of work that goes on the back end to have a, smooth show. And it's always, that's kind of the fun part though, is like all the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's like I said, that's the part that a lot of people don't see. So who's someone, like, what would you say is one of like your favorite projects that you ever got to work on? Someone that you're just like one of those amazing bucket list moments.
I think there's definitely been a handful, but one that really sticks out is actually Zach Scott Theater.
Okay.
They have a big gala every year called Red Hot Soul. And we got connected with them about 5 years ago. We've been working with them every year since then. But they came to us and they were like, hey, we do this under a huge Sperry tent. It's a major fundraiser for our kids program. There's dance numbers, there's a band, there's auctions, there's all these elements. And because we're under a tent, it's really hard to, show the participants and the attendees visually, what are they bidding on? Or, it's hard to, sometimes the sight lines are difficult because there's these just amazing, floral pieces by David Curio. And so they kind of came to us with this problem, and the theme of that year was New York. And so we kind of brainstormed for a little bit, and then we came up with this idea of building a 20-foot tall truss tower in the center of the tent with 4-sided LED walls. And that was like essentially like New York Times Square. And that was awesome. And we designed it, a big part of production, and a lot of these other production, houses, the big ones do it, is you actually design the whole show like in CAD and SketchUp, and mock-ups before the show even happens. So the client can visually see, this is how it actually looks. This is the scale. These are our sight lines. This is how, everything from also like, we type in the computer and it spits out what the sound is going to do. And it shows this is your sound coverage, this is your hot spot. These are your cold spots, so you need to add another speaker here so that it covers it all evenly. So there's a ton of, mathematics and science behind it, and a lot of design work behind it. And so that was a ton of fun because we got to design this big truss structure, this, awesome 4-panel LED wall.
It was around everyone?
So it was like directly in the center.
Oh, okay.
And it went up 20 feet. And so everybody was around it. And so at that point, there wasn't like a bad seat in the house. And they do all these dance numbers. And that was also, kind of that's when we really started getting into IMAG, which is like when you go to ACL and you see the band on the big LED wall, that's what that is. And so we were able to put cameras in the room, throw it up on the LED wall for all the dance and performance numbers. So it just brought, amazing energy and life to the party. And they had a record fundraiser that year. And that's like a big rewarding part. It's not necessarily about the money contract. It's the energy, it's the experience, both for the client and the attendees, that's why we do it. And so that was just really rewarding to be a part of that, help direct and produce that. And it's been ongoing, I guess COVID this past year, we weren't able to do it, but it's just been an ongoing thing where we've just been having a ton of fun with it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so we touched on, obviously, the artists and all those people were affected with COVID and all of that. So obviously with events not happening, was there a pivot or was there something different that you did during that time that you kind of had to, like you said, go back to the drawing board because there's no events to be throwing shows for, experiences?
Right. And we did. And honestly, that's like the drawing board is where I love to live. That's like,
okay.
That's kind of where
that's
my
good.
brain is.
So where other people fall, you're thriving.
That's
great.
I guess so. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's, that's just when it's to infinity and beyond, you can take any imaginary idea and then try and create it into reality. And that's really our job as a production company is we get these crazy ideas and we try and balance it with like reality of like, okay, well this, truss weighs this much weight and you have to have this proper rigging, like there's some certain things you got to be aware of. It requires this much power. But we love to actually bring that to life and turn it into life. And so with COVID, the drawing board, it was big. It was definitely scary this time around because this was the first time that things were stopped, not because like a permit didn't get pulled or like, a mistake got made or something like that. It was nobody's fault. And so that was what was kind of scary about it was that, you didn't really know how to change or what to change. And so we were really fortunate enough to, right when COVID hit, we were approached by Eric Inc., who started Love and Lightstream. Mm-hmm. And that's how that started. The whole Love and Lightstream brand was he wanted to throw a show at Schultz. This was like the Saturday that South by got canceled. And we did that live stream at Schultz. And then Black Fret was there and they saw it and they were like, hey, we're going to be the only stage happening in town. So we've got to just do a 5-day stretch. And so we kind of all put our heads together and that's what we did. And so at Schultz for 5 days, we had over 40, 50 bands come out. We live streamed it, no in-person audience. The mayor came out, was talking. And we ended up raising, I think, close to $100,000 to go back to Black Fret and Ham and a couple other organizations. And so we were really fortunate to have been a part of that because it also softened the blow. Because that first week when it got canceled, everybody was just I mean, yeah, everything was up in the air.
Did you have projects? I'm sure with.
Yeah, we had a ton of projects that got canceled, and not just South by, like, we had things booked out for up to a year that just got wiped.
Oh my goodness.
And so, and a lot of those things too, there's no deposits. There's just things. So it's just like, it's all off the books, it's gone. And, it was actually really fortunate that we did that first, live stream in early March, or when it all was kind of happening, because it sort of distracted us from the misery and gloom, and really kind of filled us up when everything was really down. It like filled our cup up, and that gave us the momentum of being like, okay, live streaming, like that's where we go to the drawing board. And so we started working with Black Fret. We started working with Zach Theater, some of our other clients, and just saying, okay, how can we still connect with your audience? How can we still remain relevant? And we just help them navigate the digital world and translate from live to stream. So that was part of our pivot. And then, our business has always been a very kind of all over the map. And so not only do we do event production, but we do commercial AV installations. So like Eberly and Native Hostel, some of those other venues, we've actually gone in and installed their network and sound systems and all that stuff. So when COVID hit, we were fortunate to still have the construction side of our business still kind of operating and going, great. And, opportunities there. So that definitely helped kind of get through some of the slower moments. And we actually put a lot more focus into that as well. It gave us the time to put more focus in that. So it's been a weird thing.
You weren't kidding. The highs and the lows, and the highs and the lows. So what would you say would be a moment that kind of like surprised people, or that they maybe didn't know you were part of that project, but it was, high publicity, or a lot of people knew about it?
Let's see.
I feel like y'all are like low key involved in a lot of things.
We are, yeah.
That people may not, like you said, kind of like an unsung hero behind the scenes. That's what I mean. Like unless something happens, then they're like, oh, that was Drew. That was the word company. Like you want everything to run smooth and not there to be any kind of fire drills. But,
I'm trying to think. Like some of them is like, we got NDAs on.
Oh, so you can tell. We're all friends here. This is a safe space.
Waterloo Greenway, that's one of them.
Yeah. So tell people about that. So, and thank you. So y'all invited me out to that. So it was a really cool project that is underway. That's right on the middle, right, of down. It's kind of like in the middle of downtown.
Yeah. 15th and Red River.
15th and Red River. And it's just this beautiful outdoor amphitheater that is just going to be crazy, amazing.
Yeah, they're really doing it right. It was actually where the original Fun Fest was. Waterloo Park.
Fun.
I know.
I never got to go to that. That was the one festival I never got to go to here.
Oh, but yeah.
I heard some great stories.
And Margin Walker, Graham Williams, like there's some crazy talented people who have like set the stage, for us to do our thing. Yeah. And so, but yeah, so Waterloo Greenway is at that site. And they did every year they do Creek Show, which is like this really cool immersive artist installation where you walk along the creek, and there's all these different designs that like architecture firms do, design firms. You have to submit. And during COVID, they couldn't do it this year. So they, were trying to come up with what they could do to honor the Creek Show. And they decided they wanted to light up the new amphitheater. And so that was really cool. So they asked us, and we got to design the lighting and design a whole sound, compose. One of our partners, Joel, composed the music to it. And we designed a whole light show around it. So it was like, instead of there being multiple artists for Creek Show and stuff, like we got to do our thing, which was really cool.
You literally did. It was visual art that you created. So seeing all that, because I was, walking behind the scenes and seeing all that. I mean, y'all, I don't have like a team of people putting all these lights were difficult enough for me to operate, these up lights, but just seeing you, like how you coordinate everything and doing all that, there's just so much that goes into that. Now that you've done it, would you say like you can probably do it in your sleep, or is there things that you still like, constantly learning something new every day?
Some things, yes, but definitely always trying to learn. Like the technology, especially now, is moving so fast. So, luckily my role now more so, I'm more just organizing and managing, but we work with some incredible talented technicians who are just on the cutting edge of this stuff and constantly learning new things. And because they're learning new things, it helps me translate ideas and I can actually pull it off, So when I say, yeah, we can do that, then I'm like, hey dude, can we actually do that? And we can, because, there's just some incredibly talented people here in Austin. And that also just, I think is something really special that, when you ask kind of, is there something you're part of that people might not know? And I think in general, that's sort of the thing with production in Austin, is that, we've seen these incredible festivals happen. We've seen amazing artists come out of Austin. We've seen the world come to Austin. And I think a big part of that is not necessarily recognized all the time. I'm really grateful for you talking about it, is that it's the Austin production industry that's supporting that and actually allowing, these global brands and global artists to continually come back, and not come back just because they're getting paid, but because it's an experience that they can't get anywhere else. And so, hats off to all the production folk out there, because Austin really does. They bring some of the world's best. And it is an art form, it's not the kind of stereotypical grungy sound person, like smoke cigarette in the corner, not talking to anybody. Like now it really is. It's very much a part of the music, a part of the event. There's a lot of design and creativity that goes behind it now.
Yeah. So how's that process? So do the artists typically, are they pretty involved in that? Or do you think it's more, I'm just trying to understand too, for people that are maybe just getting started from, you have musicians and artists, or maybe there's other people that are in production. Like at what part, I guess, if they were getting involved in this side of it, like what would they know to ask, I guess? So like, let's say I'm a musician, I'm coming to you and I'm like, okay, I'm doing this show. Is that just something like you kind of just take the reins and give them creative ideas? Or are they coming to you and saying, okay, I want this, this, and this? Or does it depend on the experience of the artists themselves?
I think it definitely depends on the artists themselves, but my approach is I like to be proactive with it. I like to come with designs, right? I like to kind of listen to the artist or watch a YouTube video or something of them, and then come to them with some options and designs. And then, but typically they're going to have something in their head too. But I think if you're on the production side and you're getting into it, if you can offer some concepts or, some ideas, that also helps the artists, formulate what they want to do and structure how they see it. So it definitely kind of, it goes both ways a bit, but I definitely like to come with some ideas, in those conversations.
That's really cool. And so what would you say is the future right now? What's the kind of the latest and greatest kind of stuff coming down the line that people are like, just LED walls in themselves, I'm just obsessed with. I just think they're super cool. And like you said, they're the crispness of the picture that you can see now, even when you're at shows. I mean, even at ACL, if you're like sitting in the back and like Love and Light was so beautifully done. Y'all did an amazing job at that. But just seeing like what's next for kind of the future of production.
I think it's still very video heavy. Audio is always going to be audio, right? It'll always sound better and better and better. But I think the experience, is more so now gravitated towards a visual component. So both video and lighting. And so I definitely see that continuing to be the path forward. But there's also like projection mapping. There's some really cool technologies that, you know, are going to, that are more enveloping to that experience. And I think live streaming in VR is definitely a part of the future, and they're going to be a good pairing with the live events. I don't think you'll ever get away from live. Like, you know, we've gone a year now, and it's like, okay, we need that energy.
Chomping at the bits, yeah.
We're drooling for it, and I don't think you can replace that, because that energy is, I mean, that's what heals. That's what just, you know, makes the world a better place. But now we've kind of realized that, you know, in the digital world and the VR world and visual world, those are tools that we didn't really access before, because it was more or less just like melt your face, you know, at the concert. Like, that's all we're going for. Pack as many bodies in as you can and melt your face. But I think now there's definitely there's an appreciation with streaming, because there's actually some focus on the artists, you know, a lot more focus. You're not distracted by thousands of people. And also you're able to, you know, get out to more people. So I think the future is definitely going to be paired, both, you know, real world and streaming world. You're going to see a lot of those in tandem now.
Wow. It was really cool. Did you catch the Grammys this year?
I did.
That wasn't what I was expecting at all. So for those of y'all that didn't see the Grammys, I mean, it was a complete, there was no audience. There wasn't anything like that. They had people, everyone was wearing their mask, and everyone that accepted their Grammys, but just seeing the performances, I thought was very unique from that perspective, where, like you said, it was real heavy on, it wasn't just the artist just standing there. It's like the production and the audio and the visual was just over the top, and I was here for it. It's like, it was pretty great. It
was cool. And I also I really enjoyed actually when they kind of cut to shots of like the bands, like the members of the other bands on the side, you know, and that was really cool to just see them hanging out.
Yes.
You know?
And so referring to, so like, for instance, you had like Billie Eilish, who was watching, I don't know what the three people it was, but yeah, they had like 3 performances, like back to back to back. And like he's saying, all these people were able to watch each other's performances. So you'd see if it's Dua Lipa, who's Steve's favorite artist. But you know, she's performing, and you had Billie Eilish sitting next to Bad Bunny, both there, just like watching her and seeing, like you said, I thought that was a cool, even something as simple as that, just a simple shot, a camera shot of just seeing, you're like, oh wow, they're people too, or they're observing, and you get to see them react to your same kind of reaction. So I thought that was really cool too. That's a great thing to point out.
Yeah, I think it was Harry Styles rocking out the Black Pumas.
Like, yes. That was really cool. So all those, those are things that you don't normally see.
Yeah, you don't. And I think that's kind of what I think what this break in production has done is it's sort of allowed a different way of kind of thinking and capturing and stuff. And hopefully that continues on with what we see in live events. But there's also this appreciation, I think, and I definitely see it with some of our clients, of really understanding more of what production is and how it plays a very vital role to their message or to their concert or to their show or gala or whatever. It's not just people dressed in black pushing stuff, you know, they very much are a part of that experience. And I think it's been really cool because it's sort of helped production bubble up to the top a little bit. But at the same time, it is and it isn't, you know, with production. It's like, I'm like, well, you know, I'm thinking about like all the funding and stuff that's been going on. You know, there's like the Save Our Venues, there's a bunch of funded musicians, but there's nothing carved out for like production companies. And so there's still this like hidden, we're still underneath the surface when it comes to that more like federal level and just like assistance level, which is kind of still a big problem, like that's been the big fear through all of this, is actually losing a lot of the skilled labor because they have to go into a different industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's actually this kind of like rumbling right now in the production world of like, holy shit, everything is coming back, but like, we're not gonna be able to provide for everybody, right? Like there's like, we have all taken a hit. There's a lot of companies that aren't around anymore. There's a lot of crew that's not around anymore. And so, and there just wasn't really that support to get them through that. And that's kind of just been a big bummer in all this, is really seeing those people kind of left to the side and just having to either go on unemployment, or find another opportunity, but not really given a piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. So hopefully more moves in that direction.
Yeah, there's some people, because even with the people that I'm connected to just through like social media, a lot of those people are in the scene, like you said, that are part of production. So seeing them essentially, move away or have to do other things, it's just like all of us. Everyone took a hit and doing things that they probably didn't normally think they would be doing when it came to, work and careers. But what advice would you give to those people, if you can, about getting back into it? If they could, like who should they reach out to, or in general, or where should they be looking?
There's some collectives online on Facebook. There's like Austin Sound Engineers. There's Austin Sound Girls. There's also some unions and stuff, but I think it needs to be they have to take the effort to really talk amongst each other and talk about the problems. And that's also what's really weird about this, is because, musicians, we've always known they're in a rut, right? We always know that musicians have never been paid what they're worth. Like that's just been an ongoing thing in Austin. And in the production world, they certainly, I don't think they might not have it quite as hard as the musicians, because musicians, you have band members, if you get paid $200 a night, you split it 10 ways, mm-hmm. That's sort of the financial hardship of a band. With production, you're more of an individual, so if you get a sound gig, you get paid $100, $200, whatever. You can kind of float your way through it, but that's still by no means a ton of money. But we've never really, as a production industry, kind of had a band together moment. Like we've always been just competitors, friendly competitors, but mm-hmm. we're all competitors against one another, right?
Interesting. Okay.
We're all going after that, that show, that gig, mm-hmm. that contract and stuff. And in Austin, business was good. There was a ton of stuff happening. And so more and more production companies were coming up just because of the demand. But we never, we certainly we've got some, solid production partners that we collaborate with, but it's still, they're still competitors at the end of the day. Like we'll work with each other on shows. We'll, rent each other gear, that kind of stuff. But like, we're still sort of vying for the same contract every now and again, mm-hmm. and that kind of stuff. And so with COVID and everything, it really, in my mind, kind of just shined a light on like, wow, well, we haven't really organized as an industry. And I think where we can, take a page from is the NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association, mm-hmm. With the folks at Empire and Heard, mm-hmm. kind of how they took the charge in that and really brought it to a federal level, but they can't save everybody, right? They can't save production. They have to focus on them. And so I think that's sort of where maybe production, we kind of need to band together a little bit if we really want to be recognized through that lens, mm-hmm. Through that, support, financial support, whatever lens. So that's just something that we've never really had to do. Yeah. And so that's kind of where it's at now, so I think my advice would be just, talk and, share your hardships right now. Like we need to know what's going wrong and why it's not working, so we can band together a little bit more and have a solution hopefully around it.
Oh gosh, that's great advice. Because you don't think about that when because it's about the artists, and we love our artists, but at the end of the day too, like you said, there's the people that are putting it on. I didn't realize that there wasn't a huge collective for that to help. I mean, you're exactly right. You just kind of think they're all kind of jumbled in together with Neva, and you're kind of
right
left to the side. So,
and that because like Neva, it's like they're with the venues, they're supporting their staff with that venue, right? So there is sound staff and there's security and that kind of stuff. But then there's just kind of the production companies like Word, Austin Event Lighting, HK Stages, Nomad, Big House, Ilios, and those companies like ours and them, we are production houses. We're standalone. We have W-2 employees. We have W-9 employees. We have, equipment, giant warehouses, like all these things that cost a lot of money. And so when it went down, when COVID happened, they're just, other than like the EDIL and the PPP, but again, that was just sort of broad for everybody.
Right.
And so there just kind of really hasn't been anything specific towards our industry. So, we've all been, it seems like kind of getting by, but I would say we're getting by, but I know like we're all like, we just all were kind of like, all right, well, we're going to sort of go into debt for a little bit, like you're just going to have to lose, over half a, years of revenue, Unfortunately, everyone's kind of established enough to get through that, or get those loans and stuff. But if you're a freelancer or if you're a kind of up and coming small production company, you don't have 3 years of tax returns to get that money. You don't have all these things. And so, hopefully we just kind of keep working together a little bit more and seeing what comes of it.
Yeah. So everyone band together. So what is coming up for you that you're really excited about?
Man, we've got a ton. It's actually pretty crazy. Like it just like the switch hit or switch flipped. Really excited about Hotspot. So Hotspot's a concert venue where we did the drive-in, and Love and Lightstream is taking over the talent buying and promoting. And so starting April 16th is our first show out there, and it's going to be up and running 5 nights a week, concerts.
5 nights a week?
5 nights a week. And so that's really exciting. So we'll be out there running production for that. The Love and Lightstream team is great. They've got their stuff down.
They really do. I was excited. I got to work with them. I have worked with Hotspot as well when they did like the Hot Mess Fest and all that. Steve and I went to that. We went... Yeah, that was really well. It was another one that we're like, wow, this is really well done. But then, and Love and Light, we went there as well. So I got to do some promotion for that. So everything that obviously has your stamp on there is kicking ass. So
that's what's up. Yeah.
So you got that coming up. That's exciting. And I'm sure there's some things that you probably can't even tell us.
There's actually, there's a couple that I'm like, ooh, super stoked on, but I can't talk about those. But another fun one is...
You'll just tell us after.
Yeah. We're working with Yeti right now, and Yeti is supporting a campaign called Bring Music Home. And Bring Music Home, it's been a year-long effort. Like same thing when COVID hit, these organizers came together and they wanted to figure out how they could raise money for a lot of these shuttered venues. And so similar to Neva was focused more on actually getting a voice in the federal, in the federal world. But Bring Music Home is more of just it's a giant fundraiser. And so what they did is they organized, I think, 100 photographers, like band photographers, and they had them go out all across the country and take photos and do stories on their favorite venues. And they just finished publishing this book that's getting released next month. And it's this awesome, just like it'll be a badass tabletop book, you know, all these photos and stories of all these just historic venues and all this stuff. And so,
wow, that's really cool.
We're really excited. So what we're getting to do is travel with Yeti. We've got our first show in Austin, and then we're going to go to Chicago and Denver, and we're going to record some bands at each Yeti store. There's a stage. And so we're going to film and record the bands and do interviews with those venues and bands. And it's going to be, and then, you know, that'll get released sometime in end of April. But it's a huge fundraiser. And it's another thing where, you know, Yeti just threw their 100% support behind it, said, yeah, let's do it. And so we're super stoked to be a part of that.
Well, it's exciting.
Put that together.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything that you're doing for the community, music community, and live events, y'all, would not be possible without his team and everything he's doing and everyone in the production community. So shout out to everyone out there. Please, how can people find you, or if they want to find out more about your company and
you can check us out at online at theword.co. That's WERD.
Drew spelled backwards.
And also on Instagram at The Word Company.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
To come back, and I can't wait to mosey on into some of your events.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so grateful to be in your presence and have you talk about what it is that we do.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Just honored to have you. So thank you. See y'all next week.